D'abord, je vais remercier en français le studium pour cette invitation. And I will speak in English, so I'll try to make the best of my 20 minutes. And the two questions I want to address today is, first of all, two questions, the notion of genius. You're all concerned here, some more than others. And the second question we would like to address is maybe a bit provocative. Was Leonardo a scientist? And okay, so that was my abstract, so there's no point for reading it. But my point today is, first of all, to deconstruct the false ideas about Leonardo da Vinci, and there are so many. 20 minutes will not suffice to make a list. But I also want to discuss with you what are some examples, not everything, but some examples of Leonardo's approach to science. So let's start with something everybody knows. That's Leonardo da Vinci. So you think. Because in fact, we know that this so-called self-portrait from Torino is not a self-portrait at all. When Leonardo drew that portrait, he had not that age, which is 60-something. So, and this is well known because many historians, art historians like Daniel Arras, have worked about it and shown that this is the portrait of a philosopher. So that in his old days, Leonardo self-fashioned as a philosopher and as Plato or Pythagoras or whatever, is certainly a case. But in fact, there's a portrait by Leonardo da Vinci made by his apprentice Francesco Melzi, which looks like an old bearded man. But I'm well placed to know that there's no, it's very difficult to confuse a bearded man with another bearded man. So, okay. But just to show you that when we address the question of Leonardo, there's a fog made of myth that we have to get over. So, one of the most important sources for our knowledge of Leonardo's life is Giorgio Vasari's Life of Leonardo da Vinci. I've tried to translate it into English. Let me read the text because this is important. Every word is important here in the fashioning of the idea of a genius. Heaven, in its goodwill, sometimes concentrates on the mortal its most precious gifts and marks with such an imprint all the actions of this fortunate privileged person, so that it seems to bear witness less to the power of human genius than to the special favor of God. So here, genius comes from God. So you've got to believe in God to accept that, but that's another issue. Leonardo da Vinci, whose beauty and grace will never be sufficiently praised, was one of those chosen. His prodigious ability made him easily overcome the greatest difficulties. His strength, his skill, his courage had something truly royal and magnanimous. And his fame, dazzling during his life, increased even more after his death. Leonardo, son of Ser Piero da Vinci, would have distinguished himself even in science and fine letters, if a certain inconstancy of mood had not, unfortunately, this is Vasari being naughty about Leonardo, but I came back to that. If a certain inconstancy of mood had not, unfortunately, been combined with all the rare faculties of his gifted mind, this conducted him to approach, then give up a lot of things to which he preferred tricks, mere tricks. There's a lot to discuss here. What is genius, so transcendental inspiration, or the fact of dealing with different subjects, many different subjects, and Vasari also claims that you shouldn't be attracted by tricks or funny stuff to be a proper scholar. I totally disagree with that. And I think Leonardo disagreed as well, and we have to discuss that. So first of all, let me give you, this is the boring part, just explain the historiography that created the idea that Leonardo was a genius scientist. First of all, you've got to keep in mind that Leonardo da Vinci's writings about science and technology were pulling on in the 18th century and only known when Richter in 1883 decided to publish the first edition of Leonardo da Vinci. So that means that there was no influence whatsoever of Leonardo's science and technology in the period that preceded. This can be discussed. We might discuss that. But more or less, the texts were not available. And just after that, at the beginning of the 20th century, everywhere in Europe, people claimed that Leonardo was a genius. One, in France, the important person is Pierre Duhem, an important philosopher, who discussed very in depth the ideas of Leonardo da Vinci and claimed that Leonardo was the link between medieval ideas and ancient ideas and modernity. So, and everybody accepted that, especially at the Académie des Sciences. Everybody claimed that Leonardo, but we've forgotten the name of those who claimed that. More interesting is that at approximately the same moment, there was a famous chemist, Marcelin Berthelot, who said, well, come on, was he really an inventor? Because when you think of it, all the technology, which is assumed to be Leonardo's technology, in fact belongs to the Middle Ages, belonged to people who before him were very important and that we have completely forgotten. Konrad Kisser in Germany, and many others, Francesco Di Giorgio Martini, Tacola in Italy. So, and he was right about that. So that's the problem. Second phase after that, Leonardo entering pop culture with a very important novelist, Merezhkovsky, from Russia, who wrote the romance of Leonardo da Vinci, a novel called Leonardo da Vinci. So this influenced not only Freud, but also Eisenstein. Maybe you know that the war between on the Neva, the battle on the Neva, is inspired by Leonardo da Vinci's writing on how do you describe a battle. So we owe to Merezhkovsky a lot of myths about Leonardo, the fact that Leonardo tried to fly over Fiesole on one of his airplanes, and many other items are there because Merezhkovsky decided they were the true story of Leonardo. Even now, if you go on the hill Fiesole, just above Florence, there's a millstone claiming here the apprentice of Leonardo da Vinci has tried Leonardo da Vinci's plane. Of course, this is total myth. 1939, another important moment in the building up of the myth of Leonardo da Vinci under Mussolini, Il Genio Italiano, an international exhibition trying to explain that, well, Leonardo was not the only brilliant Italian scientist, but it was important for Mussolini and his Ministry of Culture to build up a myth around Leonardo. Leonardo was military, of course, and so bringing together the weapons of Mussolini. And the first models, nearly the first models, there were some before, but not much. So most of the models that you see now in all sorts of very bad museums all over Italy come from that period. But these models have disappeared in Hiroshima because they were lent from a fascism to another fascism. And in 1945, they disappeared, sadly. 1952, sorry to go back to these dates, but they are important to understand the building up of the myth. 1952, there was a celebration of the 5th century of the birth of the great man, and there was a big conference in Paris with Alexandre Koyré and so many other important people, and then the pendulum went back. At that time, it was quite fashionable to say that Leonardo invented nothing and was not a scientist. One of Koyré agreed with that, and George Sarton was a professor from Harvard who claimed that Leonardo had never read anything, and that he was unable to read anything, unable to finish anything, and that he was definitely not a scientist. What about now? 1997, Paolo Galluzzi, who used to be the director of the Museo Galileo in Florence, Paolo Galluzzi revisited the ideas of Marcelin Berthelot and Bertrand Gilles, another French author, and tried to, with a lot of beautiful models this time, try to make sense of the predecessors of Leonardo da Vinci in technology, but nothing about science at that stage. So, if we go back to Duhem said Leonardo had read many medieval scientists, and that he was the point of passage between the Middle Ages science and the new modern science. Is that true? Because Sarton said this is not true at all. In fact, most recently, my friend Carlo Vecce from University of Naples has, with a team of workers, has rebuilt Leonardo's bookshelves. So we know exactly what Leonardo has read. And for sure, well, you know that Leonardo was an illegitimate son. So he never studied Latin, for instance, which is quite a handicap when you work on medieval science. But in fact, when he was 30-something, he started to learn Latin, and he had lots of people who helped him to understand very complex text. So thanks to Carlo Vecce, now we know that he knew much more than what we think he knew. So I profit from the fact that I have lots of scientists in front of me to install some kind of caveat here. There are a lot of fake quotations on the internet. So please check them. That's science, to check quotation. And for instance, things that I've seen nearby, but in French newspapers, in people defending bio-imitation, and so all the things. So, les détails font la perfection, et la perfection n'est pas un détail. Not in Leonardo da Vinci. Scrute la nature, c'est là qu'est ton futur. You scientists seem to love that quotation. This is not by Leonardo da Vinci. Okay? So can you spot for fake citation, fake quotations? We've been talking about what is fake knowledge. So about Leonardo, you've got lots of fake knowledge. When you have no precise reference to the folio and to the manuscript, it becomes highly suspicious. It's impossible to retrieve the quotation in the notebooks, even more suspicious. Lots of anachronism also in these quotations. Nobody would speak of future in the Renaissance. Nobody would love this very Normalian grammatical constructions as a chiasm. Les détails font la perfection et la perfection n'est pas un détail. Certainly not Leonardo. Okay? So there are so many false identities which have been created by our retrospective look on Leonardo. The man who invented the future, Leonardo the ecologist, who loved the trees and the little animals, and the vegan. Quite difficult to address this question, but I can address, but we don't have time. The humanist, Leonardo is certainly not a humanist. A humanist that doesn't speak Latin. It's some kind of a contradiction. The guy would never finish any project. That's Giorgio Vasari's claim. This can be discussed, and I'm ready to do that. And of course, you have all the pop culture coming on top of that. And, but sometimes the pop culture, you know, this serial on Leonardo da Vinci, and I don't remember the title, but it's not important. But that comes directly from Merezhkovsky. And Leonardo, member of the Illuminati, that's, okay. So, did Leonardo achieved anything in the field of sciences? This is our point now. So now that we know that the genius has been built along the years, we've got to look at what he really wrote. So you know that Leonardo claimed that he was a man without letters, a homo senza lettere. But that was a way, he was ironical about it. He said that to people who thought were knowledgeable, but who were less knowledgeable as he was. And that was some kind of a joke. So don't take it for granted. Who was, okay. I have not much time, so I'm trying to go quick. I think one of the most important arguments in the idea that Leonardo was a scientist is that he was one of the first ones to theorize about experimentation. Much before Robert Boyle and the Science Academy from London. Here you have one of the numerous sentences by Leonardo who claims that knowledge should come from experimentation and the repetition of experimentation, which is not what people used to do in European universities at that time. This is an ideology that comes from the bottega, from the workshop. This is absolutely not something that was fashionable in universities. It has to be clear. So in the 20 minutes I don't have any more. It's obvious that I will not be able to list all the fields in which Leonardo was a scientist, but let me examine some examples. First example, refutating Galen. Galen was that physician, medical doctors from the 2nd century, and sometimes Leonardo refutates, in fact, what was taught in the medical schools of the Renaissance with experiments. For instance, to understand the mechanism of breathing, Leonardo da Vinci imagined to make a model. You see that I've made it again. He imagined to make a model of oven bellows, reflashing the hot air by a system of valves, and pulsing on the other side a cold air, which, once heated, will be evacuated. So, such a system, for him, existed in the lungs, and to demonstrate that, he made a model. And this was typical of the kind of approach that was accepted in workshops, in painters' workshops at that time. Another example, so much for the vegan. Leonardo describing the techniques for slaughtering pigs by means of a punch. And it's used here for locate diastoles at the time of the animal's agony, when the dart goes tuk, tuk, then you can describe the systole-diastole system. And starting from that, Leonardo, systole and diastole were explained by Galen. So in Roman times, this was well known. And what Galen said about the functioning of the heart in the 2nd century was that between, as you can see here, between the two ventricles, you say ventricles in English, of the heart, you had holes. So that's what Galen said. In fact, they do not exist. But it was what was taught in university. And at the first period of his life, Leonardo drew exactly what he knew was the functioning of the heart according to Galen. But later on, after, well, we are already in the 16th century then, Leonardo said, yeah, but come on. He dissected the heart of an ox. And he said, come on, this doesn't work like that. So what creates, because according to Galen, between the ventricles you had blood and air which were mixed together thanks to the intraventricular holes. And this would create, according to Galen, the living spirits of the body. It was really interesting for me this morning to hear our Nobel Prize friends talking about mechanics and the mechanics of molecules, because it has 5 centuries before. So it has much to do with that. So that's mechanics. So Leonardo said, yeah, what is important is what is going on when the blood goes outside the ventricles. And his idea, so he drew the valves, these valves. He loved the geometrical form of the valves, as I loved the geometrical forms we've seen in the morning. And he said, okay, this is some kind of apparatus that pulses the blood in the heart. So we tried to recreate this kind of valve. And he said, what's going on is that because of the valve, because of the pump system, the blood would get out of the ventricle, making whirlpools, making vortices. And he said, we can demonstrate that by a glass model. And we pump water with grains of millet inside the glass model, and we will see what happens. We will see if there are whirlpools. And of course there were whirlpools. And recently our colleagues I think that's in the MIT, recreated that informatically, and that was interesting. And in a movie for France 3, we tried to show all that. Another question, I could discuss the question of fossils. since we've been hearing this morning about geology. Leonardo, before anybody else, got rid of the idea that there was a flood that got the fossils on top of mountains. And to make sense of this, he made sense of the idea of sediments, and he observed all sorts of fossils, and with some kind of reasoning that was able to dismiss any ideas, because he said, yeah, but some fossils were alive when they arrived on top of the mountains, and some were dead. So you can say they arrived there with their little members. So there was another theory to get rid of, which was a Neoplatonistic theory. The Neoplatonistic theory, which is, by the way, very fashionable in some parts of America nowadays, is that God made seeds inside the earth of fossils. But then, Leonardo claims, why is matrix rocks not shattered by germination? And why is it that fossils are only found in strata with oceanic characteristic and nowhere else? So you see, this is a kind of demonstration. Physics. Leonardo was very interested in the question of motion, the motion of projectiles. How is it that a bullet that leaves my hand goes on when it has left my hand? Because the bullet doesn't know it has left my hand. So how is it that, forget what you know about modern physics. According to Aristotle, and first of all, Leonardo believes Aristotle. According to Aristotle, the reason why a stone goes on is that because the air which is in front of the stone goes behind the stone and pushes it, which of course is absurd for us, but was not so absurd for Leonardo at the beginning of his research. But from this folio, he changed his mind. He changed his mind because he said, yeah, let's imagine that we shoot inside a gourd full of water with an arquebus. Then, if Aristotle is right, the bullet should stop because there's no more air that pushes the bullet, it's water. And you cannot say it comes behind, because behind the gourd closes itself on the bullet. So I had the opportunity, thanks to the money of the Région Centre, to reenact that. So we reconstructed an arquebus. We tried even in rainy days, and we've been to a police scientific center in Switzerland, and we tried to shoot in a gourd, within a gourd, and to photograph what happens there with this kind of camera that is very powerful and that can take many, many pictures within a second. So we've seen what happens. And of course, there's no doubt the bullet crosses the gourd, and if you replace the gourd by jelly, which we did here, you can see exactly what happens. So, Aristotle, 2,000 years of science deleted by experiments. Yeah, I know. Leonardo also reinvented the laws of friction, and my friend Salvatore here is well aware of that. I'll be short. So what he demonstrated by experience was that the contact areas have no effect on friction, and if the load is doubled, the friction effect is doubled. Wonderful. It's counterintuitive. Hydraulics. I don't know where I am. Oh, not, okay. Hydraulics. Leonardo was really, really strong on making all sorts of experiments in hydraulics about the possibility of the question of the pressure. So he made all sorts of experiments. I see. I've been too long, but on the movement of water. Yeah, let's say just this one. This is known within the community of physicists as Leonardos Paradox. So it's a paradox about bubbles. And the motion of bubbles in a still liquid. The paradox is one, is that gas bubbles of sufficiently small size rise along a rectilinear path. Larger bubbles, either, rise along a spiral or zigzag path. So Leonardo knew that from experience. And he was very keen on studying vortex. He was the first to notice that plunging water jet into a pool obtains that kind of result, and that the shapes of the streams of water have some kind of a mathematical shape. So spirals. Okay. So to conclude, there is something very fashionable today about Leonardo da Vinci and bio-imitation. Here in Région Centre, we made an exhibition on this question, and you see Federica and Salvatore, who came with critical eyes on to see the models we made. What is interesting is that Leonardo, to explore the question of the flight, human flight, examined exactly the question of the birds. And not only the fact that birds fly, and okay, the question of the bones, the question of the wings, and the question of pressure on air, but also the question of are feathers useful to fly? So that's watching nature to resolve a problem. And so we've made some machines. Yeah, so it should be it. And so to conclude really is that was Leonardo understanding nature? For sure. Was he trying to preserve nature? Not so sure. That was not in the Renaissance. You try to exploit nature as much as you can. So don't try to make of Leonardo the high priest of ecology. That doesn't work. Improving nature, for sure, was one of his points. I thank you very much.